It's me, Bamdev Poudyal. Welcome to my YouTube channel, Bachelor and Master English. I've been taking classes on English literature courses from Bachelor and Master levels. Today I am taking a lesson from the history of English literature, especially the 18th century essay, with reference to the development of periodicals through the Tatler, the Spectator, the Guardian, the Rambler, and other newspapers of the period. I'm sure you'll accompany me till the end of this video. If you are new to this channel, please like, comment and share this video. Kindly subscribe my channel for more updates on different videos and translations from world literature. Let's begin today's lesson. The beginning of modern essay. Evolution and growth of periodical journalism. 18th century England saw the spirit of improvement and progress in different areas. With industrialization grew in size and London began to assume a position as a great industrial and commercial center. The expiry of the Licensing Act in 1695 halted state censorship of the press. The general elections would be held in 20 years. These two factors combined to produce an enormous growth in the publication of periodical literature. Senior politicians, especially Robert Harley, saw the potential importance of the pamphleteer in winning the support of a wavering electorate, and numberless hack writers produced copy for the presses. Richer talents also played their part. Harley, for instance, instigated Daniel Defoe's industrious work on the Review, published from 1704 to 13, which consisted in essence of a regular political essay defending, if often by indirection, current government policy. The Examiner, published between 1710 to 11, secured contributions from Jonathan Swift's polemical skills. Periodical writers like Daniel Defoe and Jonathan Swift did not confine themselves to straightforward discursive writings, but experimented deftly with satires. Both writers made sometimes mischievous use of anonymity that was conventional at the time. Anonymity was to be an important creative resource for Defoe in his novels and for Swift in his prose satires. The Tatler and the Spectator may be said to have cradled the English familiar essays. Previously, there had been only the compact philosophical essays of Bacon and weighty texts of scholars like Milton and literary criticism of John Dryden. Now comes edition with a facile verbal touch and ease of cultivated gentleman who observes, smiles and records impressions to the delight of the reader. The subject may be featherweight, but the style gives it significance, or the subject may be a preachment, but the style gives it verb. The avalanche of political writing whetted the contemporary appetite for reading matters generally, and in the increasing sophistication of its ironic and fictional maneuvers. The new middle-class readership was largely Puritan and showed a distinct preference for factual writing over fiction, which they regarded to some extent as lying. In response to prevalent Puritan taste, there was a remarkable proliferation of journalistic writing, as we have mentioned here earlier. Two great figures stand out in this field in the early part of the century: Richard Steele and Joseph Addison. Joseph Addison and his friend Richard Steele ushered a new age of journalism in the 18th century with their papers, the Tatler, the Spectator, and the Guardian. They sold several thousand copies a day, and it's estimated that they were read by more than a tenth of all Londoners. The news sets were founded, sourced, and circulated in the bustling coffee houses of London, where men met to share and discuss the news and opinions of the day. They cost 2 pence to buy, but were free to read for anyone who paid the penny admission fee to enter a coffee house. Tables in coffee houses like Button's were covered with every available piece of media, newspapers, books, essays, prints, and pamphlets. Because of the range of reading materials and the admission charge, they became known as penny universities. The newspapers were printed on both sides of a single folio half sheet and contained a mixture of news, opinion, letters, and essays on various subjects of interest. Its publication was written by various contributors, all using the same nom de plume. Now it's time to talk about the Tatler, a periodical founded by Richard Steele, of which the first issue appeared on 12th April 1709. It appeared 3 times until 2nd January 1711, numbering 271 issues in total. The author assumes the character of Isaac Bickerstaff, a name borrowed from Jonathan Swift. According to number 1, the Tatler was to include accounts of gallantry, pleasure, and entertainment. Under the article of Wade's Chocolate House, poetry under that of Will's Coffee House, foreign and domestic news from Sir James Coffee House, learning from the Grecian, and so on. The Tatler published the kind of news and gossip overheard in coffee houses, with a good dash of fiction and exaggeration for effect. Steele pretended to place a reporter in London's 4 most popular coffee houses, rakish behavior and coquettishness criticized, and virtuous action admired. The periodical had an explicit Whig allegiance and was several times drawn into political controversy. The Tatler was republished in book form and was very widely read. Its vein of light satire was much imitated. Alexander Pope's Rap of the Luck, for example, borrows freely from the periodical's account of contemporary fashions. The English periodical essay began its first flowering in the Tatler, reaching its full bloom in the hands of Joseph Addison, who seems to have made his first contribution to the periodical in the 18th issue. From an early stage in the history of the Tatler, Steele had the collaboration of Joseph Addison, who contributed notes, suggestions, and a number of complete papers. It was succeeded by the Spectator, which they edited jointly. This paper was the forerunner of the more noted Spectator. Steele published it under the pseudonym of Isaac Bickerstaff, a name which alone was enough to make London green. A quack astrologer and almanac and maker named Patrice had been making a great deal of money out of gullible people by his predictions. To expose the fakers, Swift had issued a rival almanac by an imaginary Isaac Bickerstaff. When Patrice protested that he was not dead, Bickerstaff retorted that his own stars had proved him so, and that these statements came from an impostor. When, therefore, this new periodical appeared under the name of Bickerstaff, the town would naturally be allowed for further entertainment. It was clever advertising on Steele's part. After the paper had been running for some time, Addison discovered the real author to be his old college friend and sent in a number of contributions. In the 2 years of the Tatler's life, there are 271 numbers, of which Steele himself wrote about 2/3. Eventually, because of political difficulties, it seemed wiser to discontinue the Tatler and start again with a new paper devoted only to literature, manners, and morals. Thus, the Spectator came in as a replacement. Impressions of town life and characters is pictured as a man of quiet breeding, good sense, and good nature, who goes about London unobtrusively, saying little, much, saying much. It is a good portrait of Addison himself, who contributed approximately half the numbers. It appeared daily except Sundays, and was immensely popular with middle class and professional readership. It was strongly associated with coffee houses. The extravagancies and absurdities of the fashionable life of the day were gently and pointedly satirized. The little papers, like the former, that means Tatler, it was a daily adjunct of the breakfast table and contained its classified ads of wanted, lust or stolen, amusements, and merchandise, many of which offer amusing reading today. Like the latter, it was written in more fashion literary style and was more limited in its scope than a newspaper, having only one main article to an issue, written in clear, simple, almost conversational prose which could be understood by any reasonably educated person. Spectator adopted a fictional method of presentation through a Spectator club, whose imaginary members extol the author's own ideas about society. These members included representatives of commerce, the army, the town, respectively Sir Andrew Freeport, Captain Sentry, and Will Honeycomb, and of the country gentry Sir Roger de Coverley. The papers were ostensibly written by Mr. Spectator, an observer of London scene. Edison and Still were the principal contributors, in about equal proportions. Other contributors included Alexander Pope, Thomas Tickell, and Will Honeycomb, a man about town. Mr. Spectator himself, who writes the papers, is a man of travel and learning, who frequents London as an observer. The most important literary papers are Edison's 19 papers on Paradise Lost and his 11 essays on the pleasures of the imagination. Though sounded Whiggish in tone, the Spectator generally avoided party political controversy. An important aspect of its success was its notion that urbanity and taste were values that transcended political differences. The tone is lightly satirical, and the papers seek to enliven morality with wit and to temper wit with morality. Edison's essays were taken as a model for more than a century. The papers were collected and regularly reprinted in book form. The Spectator ran to 555 editions and was popular both with England's emerging middle classes, merchants and traders, and American readers. James Madison read The Spectator avidly as a teenager, and a 12-volume set of essays from The Spectator was among Alexander Hamilton's most prized possessions. Hamilton's biographer Ron Chernow, whose book inspired the hit musical, says he frequently recommended these essays to young people to purify their writing style and inculcate virtue. After discussing the Tatler and the Spectator, two great historic newspapers, periodicals, it's time to talk about another contribution of Sir Richard Steele and Joseph Edison. That's the newspaper called The Guardian, which was published in 1713. The Guardian was launched as a successor to The Spectator. It was a short-lived newspaper published in London from 12 March to 1st October in 1713. It was a periodical started by Sir Richard Steele. Edison was busy writing his most famous play, Cato, so early editions were edited by Steele. However, Edison took over the job of editor from July 1713 while his friend was campaigning to be elected to Parliament. He became successful in his campaign too. Edison was a big believer in virtue and wanted to ensure The Guardian only told the truth. It contained featured contributions from Joseph Edison, Thomas Tickell, George Berkeley, Eustace Bagel, Ambrose Phillips, and Alexander Pope. Edison hit on the idea of creating splendid lion's head postbox to generate some good public response for the newspaper and to encourage more people to contribute stories and comments. It was one of the first ways people were able to share contributions with a newspaper, and from his innovation emerged newspaper leader columns and opinions and letters to the editor. The influence of Edison as still in the history of journalism continues today. Although their original newspapers, the Tatler, the Spectator, and the Guardian, are now long gone, their names are all used today by the other publications. Still, an Edison seized upon the new social life of the clubs and made it the subject of endless pleasant essays upon types of mean and manners. The Tatler and the Spectator are the beginning of modern essay, and their studies of human character as exemplified in Sir Roger de Coverley are a preparation for the modern novel. Edison's essays for the Tatler and Spectator, which we still cherish, were written between 1709 and 1714. Joseph Edison was a poet and tragedian, but his legacy is the Spectator, or daily paper which he edited and co-wrote with Sir Richard Steele. In succession to Steele's The Tatler, 1709. Steele's paper amused, the Spectator educated entertainingly. With Edison's innovative journalistic ideas, the Guardian welcomed the news paper leader columns and opinion and letters to the editor, encouraging the public participation of the concerned readers and willing contributors per column and feature articles, letter to the editors, etc. And it's time to talk about the Rambler. This was the paper published by Dr. Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson also started his literary career as a journalist, making contributions to various publications. Eventually, Johnson launched his own periodical, The Rambler, a twice-weekly periodical of which 208 numbers were published from 20 March 1750 to 14 March 1752. The Rambler. Each issue which comprised a single anonymous essay on contemporary literary and social conditions. It was Johnson's most consistent and sustained work in the English language, whereas the Rambler discussed subjects such as morality, literature, society, politics, and religion. The Rambler was written in elevated prose. The essays treat a great variety of subjects: ethics, crime, marriage and family life, economics, education, prostitution, history, self-knowledge, and many others. They include character studies, allegories, stern fables, and literary criticism, including a series on John Milton. Minor contributions came from Samuel Richardson, Elizabeth Carter, Hester Chapon, and Catherine Talbot. Fervently believing that it is the writer's duty to make the world a better place and to redeem the time, Johnson crafted these essays in various forms: allegories, sketches of archetypal humans, literary criticism, and lay sermons. The majority of the subject matter in the Rambler focused more on moral than social issues. In tone and subject matter, the Rambler was both lengthier and more serious than its popular ancestor in the genre. It also had a strong element of didacticism. The Rambler contained more to sermon-like reflective essays and lacked the Spectator's dramatic qualities. Unlike its forerunner, the Rambler did not contain fictional characters. The Rambler was widely respected for the quality and power of the writing. A few days after the last issue of the Rambler appeared in 1752, Johnson's wife passed away. From 1758 to 1760, Johnson contributed a regular weekly essay to the Universal Chronicle. These essays, appearing under the heading The Idler, exhibit the moralist and social reformist perspectives of the Rambler pieces, but also treat the lighter side of the human condition through comical character sketches. We talked about different papers which had contributed for the development of periodicals and development of journalistic writings and development of fiction as well. Journalism in the 18th century did not mean what it means today. There were no great metropolitan newspapers with reporters and foreign correspondents by the score, but the ancestors of English newspapers were beginning to take shape in small news sets. Some of these were printed in the 17th century but were sooner or later suppressed because they offended the periodical party in power. Most restrictions on the freedom of the press were abolished under William and Mary. 1911 edition and still launched their famous Spectator. These three were periodicals rather than dailies, but served the purpose of both the newspaper and magazine of today. Edition and still developed the periodical, foreshadowing the modern newspaper and magazine. Still and Edition seized upon the new social life of the clubs and made it the subject of endless pleasant essays upon types of mean and manners. The Tatler and the Spectator are the beginning of the modern essay, and their studies of human character, as exemplified in Sir Roger de Coverley, are preparation for the modern novel. Okay, till now we have been discussing on periodical essays, their contributions in the development of prose and the beginning of modern novel. We talked about Joseph Addison, Richard Steele, Dr. Samuel Johnson, and many others. I'm sure you attended the lecture seriously and got my point. If you enjoyed it, please give a like to this video. If you have some queries, put your words in the comment box. I wouldn't mind you subscribing the channel for more updates from literature courses for bachelor and master levels, along with the connoisseurs of translated literature in Nepali. Thank you very much for your time, and thank you for your attention.